Many people in the Genshin community are rightfully upset after finding out that much of what we were told about the voice actor strike isn't quite as accurate as we were led to believe. The majority make a point to emphasize that despite everything we've learned, we're still in favor of actors being protected from AI exploitation, and we still want everyone to be paid fairly. And we support unions in general, regardless of how distasteful we find some of the practices and policies which are apparently common in America. Nuance is important, and people do not want to be told not to look too deep into things. We're here because we care. All we ask is a little transparency. It doesn't matter if it's complex, many of us would gladly take the time to understand. However, there are some people who have been calling for all the English voice actors to be replaced, preferably with generative AI. Let's talk about why that's the last thing most of us want. First off, it seems like it's important to make the point that collective punishment is bad. Obviously, I can't speak for the people calling for the entire Genshin cast to be replaced, but from what I've seen, they're particularly angry about the unprofessional behavior of a tiny minority of actors, who took out their frustrations on their colleagues and the fans in general. It can be hard to separate the art from the artist, and when you hear a recognizable voice saying things which make you upset, sometimes you can no longer enjoy their performances at all. It's understandable that some may just wish Hoya would throw it all out and start again. However, punishing the innocent for the sins of the few is never appropriate. If Hoya fire those few actors who have upset so many of the fans, however, I don't think anyone would really blame them. Some were also upset to learn that the withdrawal of work from Genshin is arguably separate from the strike in the first place. I touched on this in my previous video. This was one of the first things people realized once we started looking into it all. An important detail is that actors who have been working off the card are at risk of fines or expulsion from the union, and such things are under greater scrutiny during a strike. It would have been great for someone to come out and explain the difference right at the beginning, but I don't think it's fair to hold it against them if they kept silent. When your career is on the line, caution is understandable. While the lack of transparency is frustrating, the vast majority of the cast kept things professional. They don't deserve to be hit by consequences for things they did not do. One other detail which is worth addressing before we get into it is the question of why people care. I've seen some say that Genshin's story is so bad that nobody in their right mind would pay attention in the first place. I don't think anyone could accuse me of holding back from criticizing Genshin's story, and I apply the same level of analysis to every part of the game. And yet, I still play every day and enjoy it. I'll cover exactly why in a future video, but suffice to say that I still like this game and I want to continue enjoying it. And I want it to be the best possible version of itself. That applies to every part of the game, and the storytelling is a particularly important aspect which is vital despite its flaws. I want it to get better, not worse. Of course, I could switch to a different voiceover language, but unfortunately, there's something about Genshin's storytelling which makes me hate doing that. I love watching foreign language films and TV, and even keep subtitles on when watching English language ones, but Genshin's slop dialogue makes that so painful to experience that I just can't bear it. If I want to experience the story without it feeling like pulling teeth, the English voiceover is the only option for me. Plus, there are several character voices that I'm particularly fond of and would sorely miss hearing. So, of course I care about this discussion. When I'm experiencing any story, what I really want is for it to make me care. I want that magical illusion where the characters come to life and the things that happen to them make me feel real emotions. Genshin is inconsistent at this, but when they get it right, it's phenomenal. Nahida's devastation as she lets go of the one thing she ever truly wanted. Furina's despair when she thought her hundreds of years of endless torture were all for nothing. The climactic moments cut deep. The quiet moments can be fantastic too. Shanyan's words of comfort spring to mind, for example. And while quality writing is essential for these moments to work, one of the deepest and most powerful ways to build up that connection is through the character's voice. Real actors bring emotion, nuance, and lived experience to characters in a way that resonates with players. At their best, they're not just reading words aloud, they disappear into the character and truly bring them to life. The subtleties of tone, pacing, breath, and inflection all contribute to a performance that feels human, imperfect, textured, and emotionally rich. They define the character's personality, make the dialogue feel believable, and allow us to forge real emotional connections. Whether it's a quiet moment of vulnerability or a passionate outburst, real actors bring a level of depth which AI still struggles to replicate. While it's possible to tell the same stories with AI providing all of the voiceovers, humans have evolved to be incredibly sensitive to all this at a subconscious level. A voiceover which lacks the emotional nuance provided by a real actor would forever limit how much impact the story can have. And that's just what we expect when it comes to any typical character. Genshin sometimes needs much more depth and nuance. The perfect example is Furina. Spoilers, of course, if you haven't finished Fontaine's Archon quest, then skip to the next section, or better yet, go play the game. You're missing out. Furina's voice actor had many layers to portray. The first is her dramatic stage persona, the facade she shows to her people to keep them entertained and distracted, crafted to fulfill what they expect from an Archon. Behind the facade is her true self, isolated and confused, desperately hoping to stay the course but slowly breaking down in despair behind the scenes. In between is the more honest face she shows to those who are close to her. This Furina is much less flamboyant, but still hides the truth behind her and pretends to have things handled. Each scene brings out these aspects to varying degrees, and she sometimes even shifts between them when the conversation takes a turn. And then there is the fourth persona, Focalors herself, who is recognizably the same person at heart, but played with warmth and confidence, colored with a hint of melancholy for the fate which she has chosen for herself. I often complain about Genshin's lack of subtext in much of their storytelling. Furina is the shining example that proves they can get it right, and the voice acting is absolutely essential for any of that story to work at all. A good actor can't make a bad script work, but they can make a good script magical. As much as generative AI has improved synthetic voiceovers in the last few years, there's still no way it could ever manage this. Another detail I care about a lot, which gets too little attention, is how much the voice actor's creative interpretation can influence the characters. In other contexts, this is often taken to the extreme, with the actors' performances being recorded before the characters' designs have even been finalized, which lets the designers and animators shape every minute detail so that they perfectly fit the source material and emphasize the best of the actor's interpretation of the character. Even better if the actor is comfortable with improvisation. Some of the most iconic voice acting was completely off the script, and the characters we ended up with feel far more real than the version which existed in the original script. AI simply does not have that creative spark, so no matter how good it gets, it will always be missing from projects which go all in. Of course, even if Genshin were to start with improv first, that back and forth would only happen for the Chinese voice acting, and the other languages would always be a dub without the same level of integration. Despite that, the English voice actors do sometimes have the scope to improvise and interpret the characters in their own way. The most iconic of these has to be Max Mittelman's Ito, where so much of his bombastic character in the English version of the game comes from improvisation. Many of the fan favorite lines were improv, and his attitude and sass absolutely bring him to life. Most of the voice actors seem to get less room for interpretation when it comes to changing the actual words spoken, but there's still a lot of space for them to imbue them with their unique take on the character's personality and emotions. Replacing the voices with AI would mean completely losing that kind of creative spark. In addition, changing voices midway through the game is always a risky move. The voice of a character is a fundamental part of their identity, so if it suddenly changes in the midst of the story, it can be a jarring disconnect. Even if the replacement is just as good as the original, the change can shatter immersion, and people become uncomfortably aware of the voice itself. This is less of an issue when the replacement happens to a minor character or one who has only been around for a short while. For example, while Kenichi's new voice did stand out for me for a brief moment, it faded into the background pretty quickly because we had only had one patch of him being voiced, followed by half a year of silence. Replacing a more central character would be a lot more noticeable and would be hard to get past for a lot of people. This would be much more noticeable with AI due to the subtle details mentioned earlier. Even a generative AI trained directly on the voice actor's previous lines would lack nuance and range, and would step further into uncanny valley territory in more emotional moments, the moments where the acting matters the most. And again, that's what I'm here for. Anything which makes the story less impactful is a negative for me. In Genshin, the place where this gets a little less clear-cut for me is the unvoiced quests. The game has a ton of stories which are currently unvoiced, and I find them noticeably less engaging as a result, despite some of them having great plotlines and interesting lore. The experience of reading what amounts to a short novella cut into chunks at most 2 or 3 sentences long is just too torturous for me to really get into it. It's obvious why Hoyo have never voiced these quests. The amount of work it would take is huge. I don't even think money is likely to be the problem, just the sheer amount of time and effort it would take to manage and record and edit all of it would be astronomical. Hypothetically, if the voice actors were to be paid appropriately per line of dialogue generated, then for this subset of the game it becomes a question of whether the lower emotional resonance provided by the AI voiceover would be good enough to work for the story they're trying to tell. And even on that, I'm a bit skeptical. You can't just put the script into an AI and call it a day. Hoyo would need to take some time to adjust every line of dialogue so that at least some of the emotion you'd expect the character to be feeling would be expressed by the voice. The more time they spend on it, the better, but the more time they spend, the more they run into that same problem of just not having enough time to get it all done. At its best, it would still risk falling into Uncanny Valley, and the emotional moments would never quite match up to the main quests. And if they don't put that effort in, then we'd end up with such flawed voiceovers that the story would become a mess. It would be cool to have the entire game voiced, but even with AI, I'm unconvinced it would work. And outside massive well-funded games like Genshin, I just don't see any place where AI voiceovers are really needed. Even for tiny indie projects, there are so many aspiring voice actors who would be excited to play the part. Many would do it for free, or for some modest share of any profits after the devs have recouped their investment. And many devs even voice their games themselves. And once you get beyond those who basically don't have a budget at all, there's really no excuse. It'll be interesting to see whether the AI voice generators can ever get close to the level where it's even half decent for a story-focused game, and how much time and effort it would actually save in the long run for someone who actually wants a coherent and nuanced performance which can portray a relatable character. I suspect that it's way further off than the people arguing in favor of AI would like us to believe. And either way, games are supposed to be an expression of human creativity. Voices are such a fundamental aspect of how we connect to characters that I cannot imagine wanting to play games which sever that connection. Just look at how games like Genshin handle music. For decades now, we've had software which can create passable synthetic performances from non-existent orchestras. But companies still invest thousands in real recordings by real people because it does make a difference and people can hear it. If we end up in a world where some games go the AI route and others don't, I know for sure which ones I'll be buying. This situation has quickly become a minefield to talk about. Even if you take the time to look into the documents posted publicly and ask for clarity about some of the concerning clauses, some will take that as you rooting for the death of human creativity and its wholesale replacement with AI. Fact is, that's just not where we're coming from, aside from a tiny minority who are lashing out in anger. I care more than most about the art of storytelling and want those AI protections to be enshrined in people's contracts, or even better, in law. I'm glad to see that voices have returned to Genshin in the most recent update, though I really wish we could know the background behind that happening, and I hope the actors who have returned do in fact have those protections in place. Guess we'll probably never know. Also, since people sometimes wonder, yes, this is my real voice, and my hand-typed scripts which are all sparked by interesting discussions, often from my streams on Twitch, I have never and will never take the shortcut of letting AI do my work for me, as that would completely defeat the point of why I do this in the first place. Until next time!